There's no such thing as a perfect resume, so don't sweat it. There are three basic components to creating a resume. What do you want to convey? To whom are you conveying it? And what have you got to work with? And things to remember when you're writing a resume is a marketing document. All right, you want it to be compelling. You don't want a resume to read like a fact sheet, or like if you look at products and buy products, we all buy products on Amazon. When they talk about the product description, it sounds exciting and what it's going to do for you, and it's all truthful. But then you might go to the specs, the product specs, which are boring because it's the weight and the size and all that. You don't want your resume to read like that. You want some language to come through. The key that we work with is trying to have you show up in your resume, putting you into the language, have it sound like your voice. It's not just what you have done, but how you've gone about doing it. Companies now are very big on people being able to adapt. It's not just what you know, because things change so radically. It's how you go about solving problems or learning or getting things done. So what you bring to that. And then we also like to say that you want to put your personal stamp on it. Everybody brings something a little bit different to the role or to the organization. What did you bring to that role that kind of changed and was unique about yourself? This is the method that we came up with when we wanted to articulate what we did with these candidate profiles. We had to put it down on paper and analyze what we actually put down on writing, what we did intuitively. Personal formula plus your story equals your professional narrative. Personal formula are the traits that you have, that all of us have, that are unique to us. That you could be calling, and they're not really skills because they're not learned. They're more inherent. It's more personality traits that drive how we do things. Your story is essentially both your personal, call it personal experience, a personal experience, plus your professional narrative, the arc of your professional. I'm sorry, the arc of your professional career. Why you took certain jobs, what you learned from each job, and why you made the moves that you did. If you put the two of them together, ultimately you end up with your professional narrative. It combines and drives the language that you might want to use moving forward. It also is, well, let me dive into it to give you better examples. Personal formula, here are traits, all right? These are not all the traits in the world. These are the traits that I pulled out to kind of give an example of personal formula. Someone might be logical and even-tempered and independent and spontaneous and what have you. What we like to do when we talk to candidates is we ask them to try to pick 5 traits that describe them. And sometimes in talking with them, we will suggest traits to them. We also will have them talk to or think about how a boss would describe them, or a spouse, or a best friend, because sometimes there's a different interpretation there. And we try to bring that down to about 5 traits that comprise their personal formula, how they will go about doing things. One of the other important things to bring up with personal formula is it's not something, there's no such thing as a bad personal formula, all right? Personal formulas should not be aspirational, or something you want to be, or something you think you should be, or something you think the person across the desk or whoever's interviewing you wants to hear. You want to be, this is where authenticity comes in, because the traits, your personal formula that you bring to the job, they want to evaluate whether you'll be successful in that job. Also, people make judgments about personal formulas. They want to have a certain type of personal formula. I pulled this out specifically: structured, procedural, even-tempered, methodical, dependable, and deliberate, to kind of make a point, because the way I look at that, see, I'm not many of these at all. I'm more improvisational, I'm more creative, I'm more spontaneous. But these are great, wonderful traits. And these are traits that you want. Let's say a brain surgeon is operating on you. You do not want a brain surgeon who's going to be improvisational and is going to make things up as they go along. Let's take an airline pilot. With an airline pilot, you want your airline pilot to be procedural, even-tempered, dependable. You want him, when he's landing that plane, to say, You know, I'm going to get creative today. I'm going to try to land it backwards. All right. You don't want that. You don't want him to be saying, I've been going to New York all month long. Why not go to Miami? Let's do something a little bit different. So traits, choose the trait that fits you the best, and you're more apt to be successful in the role and be happy in the role. To get a little bit deeper into this, I want to take you through how we would develop this with a particular specific candidate. Ava came to us. She had a hodgepodge of information, and I'll take you through how we worked out this whole thing. She came to us saying, I want to be a data analyst. I want to do quantitative work. On her resume, she had an undergraduate degree and a master's degree in economics. She had 1 year towards a PhD in economics. She had a master's degree in education. She had about a half dozen certifications in data and programming language and what have you. Her current job, she listed, was to be a translator, doing professional, to do translations. She also worked at Costco. She also worked as a teacher. She also worked as a trader, a day trader. And with that, when we looked at the resume, it looked all over the place. So what we needed to do is we wanted to take out some of the noise and focus Ava, and I'll take you through the process. In conversations with Ava, we came up with her personal formula, which she was very sensitive to nuance. She could read situations and adapt to them. She was very quantitative, collaborative, intellectually curious, which is obviously with pursuing education and different things. She was exercising that. And she had a very, very positive attitude. Her story was essentially that she grew up in China, outside of Hong Kong, I think. And when she grew up, to be successful, you should go into finance. So she went into finance, got an undergraduate degree, master's degree, got a PhD program because she wanted to know everything, and then dropped out a year after her PhD program to try it out. She worked for a year as a day trader and realized, I don't like this. All right.
She's very successful.
So she was very successful, but she said, I don't enjoy this. And when trying to decide what to do next, all of her family were teachers, and teaching was very valued in her family, and in China in general. She said, that would be a good thing for me to do. So she went and got a master's degree in teaching, got a teaching job, and then had some side jobs to make some extra money, because teachers generally have some times. One of them was translations, because she spoke Chinese and English. The other was working at Costco. And what she found was her role in teaching, what she enjoyed most about teaching was the data analysis of student achievement. What she enjoyed about her Costco job, signing up new members and credit cards, was she started to delve into, how do we get them to re-up? How do we look at the numbers and crunch the numbers to make sure that they will engage again? And she realized that she thinks her calling is data analysis. So she took courses and certificate programs to get those skills. And so that's basically why she came to us saying, okay, I want to do data analysis. So the key for us was, how do we develop her professional narrative that'll be helpful for her. The common thread for Ava was she really liked working with numbers. All right. Every one of the jobs she had, she was gravitating towards the quantitative side of things. Realizing she wanted to use her quantitative skills, she decided to find a job as a data and quantitative analyst. Our role in looking at her resume was about 80% of her resume. It's the 80-20 rule. 80% of her resume was all work earlier on, her history, which wasn't really super relevant to what she was doing now. It created a lot of background noise. We wanted to shift that from 20% of her background and 80% moving forward, concentrating on the data analysis piece. She had her current job was the translation job, because she had done that for part-time for the most of her career. That really, yes, it steered people in a totally wrong direction. We just totally took it off. And what we essentially had her narrative become, and for her to embrace, was she began her career feeling that she needed to be successful. She needed finance to be successful. She turned her attention to doing what she thought she should do with teaching. Ultimately, she gravitated towards what she is good at, and what she enjoys and wants to focus on that data analytics. The resume now had 80% of it focusing on where she wanted to go with this. Barbara's going to continue this now and take you a little bit. We're going to talk a little bit still about Ava and how we rebuilt her profile summary so it started to point in the direction in which she wanted to go. Then we're going to get back to me, and I'm going to do sum up a little bit, and then hopefully we'll take your questions.
So thanks, Jay. This obviously, I'm sure, looks pretty familiar to everyone. It's the basic structure and components of a resume. Highlighted in yellow is the profile summary, which is where I'll focus at the outset using Ava as an example. And then we'll move into professional experience, and I'll focus there too, using someone else as an example there. The other areas I will circle back to briefly at the end. There's a lot of information about those online that you can find readily. I'll try to just cull it down for you. But pretty much the profile summary and professional experience are where your voice comes through the most. So moving into professional summary, most people or many people do include one. We think it's a non-negotiable part of your resume. The reason for that is that it pretty much provides the context for all of your other experience, your academic training, your work experience, your skills. You get to control this section. You get to focus it the way you want to focus it. We kind of call it, and not meaning to be pejorative, idiot-proofing your resume. So anybody who's going to read your resume has some guide or like the table, sort of the beginning, that just the overview. And remember, people reading your resume don't know you. And they're going to have probably about some people say people only look at it for 2 minutes. I don't know if that's true. But a lot of times they really read it quickly. So you want to give them the most informed way to look at your resume that you can. So the summary section of that is absolutely in there all the time. It can be phrases or sentences.
Kind of says what you're about to see is this. And then you validate it with your jobs and your education.
It will be substantiated later on. People do use an objective. Typically that's done when you're in a career transition, or like in the situation with Ava, which you'll see, where there's been so much going on that you want to focus on one thing most. And then some people include a highlight section. Generally that's bullet points. It could be core competencies. It might be key accomplishments. It might be highlighted or skills. The skills section is very typically used in technology. I don't know how many of you are tech people out there today, but it may not be relevant for many as well. So we're going to look at Ava, bring the lens back in a little bit closer here. And this is her, I've changed the contact information at the top to protect her privacy, but it is actually the profile summary that was on her resume when I first saw it. And if you look at it, at a first glance, it looks perfectly fine. There's nothing wrong with it. The problem is that she sort of talks about herself a bit in the first and last sentences, but the chunk in the middle, the body, the bulk of it is all stuff you're going to see later on in one way, shape, or form or another. And looking at a resume is valuable real estate. You don't want to waste space. So those skills are going to pop up later. Many of them aren't even really all that relevant to what she wants to do as a data analyst. And you just don't get a flavor for her. A lot of even the language talking about herself is so generic as to be almost not meaningful. This is what we came up with after we went through the exercise of working out her personal formula, her story, and her professional narrative. And one of the things you'll notice is I left a lot of space. There's a little more than I would on a real resume, but I leave space in between so that people can actually readily read this. So it's not all jammed together, which when you're reading, Jay and I can read hundreds of resumes or 100 in a day. And trust me, when you're reading that many, if it's hard to read, it's human nature. You just don't read it that carefully. It's like reading really tiny print in a book. So her objective is clearly stated as a data analyst. She had lived in as many places as she had different types of jobs, including, Hong Kong, New York, New Hampshire, Rochester, Connecticut. So, and she was relocating to the Bay Area. So I wanted it to be very clear that she was not going to be requiring relocation. So I put that in there as well. And then all of her sort of description is very much reflective of what we came up with in her personal formula. She was a very strong communicator, which is in the last sentence. Interestingly, English is not her native language, and she's not fluent in English, but still she could communicate extremely well. And I saw that, firsthand. She was also a very strong project manager. She was able to establish milestones and feedback loops, and that was something that came out when we talked about how her boss would describe her. She was very good working with people. Jay mentioned sensitive to nuance. That came through in her work with clients as well as management. So we tried to get as much of her personal formula into this profile summary as we could.
Like her professional narrative. It's
Exactly.
a combination of both, and her story, where she was and where she's going.
So I'm going to pull the lens back for just a moment here before moving on to professional experience, and just talk broadly about the mechanics of putting together a resume. Most times, with 2020, you're going to need multiple versions. If nothing else, you will need to tweak it each time you apply to a different job. People do ask if they can use the templates that are out there. There are many of them, and we say, sure, go ahead. Caution is they tend to go viral. Sometimes we'll see 3 resumes from different people in a day that look identical. That template must have just gone viral. So we recommend that you make sure to customize them enough so that they reflect you and you don't look like everybody else. The name of the game here is to distinguish yourself. Many times people say, how long can it be? Our general rule of thumb is there's no real specified length. Most professionals agree. We know when they're too long, but we don't say they must be a certain length. Don't feel like you have to get it down to 1 page unless you're a recent graduate, in which case you probably should. But for the most part, you want to make sure that it's legible, as I showed you before in the example with Ava. Leave enough white space that people can actually read them. We encourage using functional titles. That's a topic that warrants its own slide. I'll get there later. And there are some pitfalls to avoid. Do not use too many graphics unless you're a graphic artist and then have a field day. Keep the emojis completely off your resume. We sometimes see them and it's like, why? We have no idea. Use fonts that are, you don't have to use Times New Roman by any means, but use fonts that are easy to read and fairly typical. You don't want to use a fancy script or something like that. And keep color to a minimum. It's kind of like graphics, like just sparingly, and blue, gray, nothing too fancy. Make sure you proofread and have somebody else proofread your resume. We just redid our website and people had read it and said, I found a typo. Like no matter how many times we proofread that website, it was ours and we couldn't do it well on our own. And then be sure to send your resume out as a PDF because you want to make sure the formatting doesn't jump around, or worse yet, pages get lost. So don't use a doc format, just make sure to put that into a PDF. I'm just keeping the lens a little broad here for a moment. Keywords are a necessary evil in today's world. I will speak in a moment about algorithms, but your resumes, if you are applying to a job, most likely will go through an application portal, which will be put through an algorithm to scan for keywords. And I'll dive into that a little more in a minute. Generally speaking, actions speak louder than words. You don't want to use a lot of flowery adjectives. You want to use verbs and nouns that indicate that what you've done. Metrics are the word of the decade. Everybody wants metrics about everything. Sometimes they're ridiculous. Qualitative metrics are fine. Not everything fits into a quantitative metrics box. Don't feel like you have to squeeze what you've accomplished into that kind of format. But do try to highlight, and I'll show you how I like to do that. I find it easiest when we get to professional experience in just a moment. Take ownership of your work. Ladies, girls, we are terrible. This is a politically incorrect statement, but it's just a fact, so I'm going to lay it out there. Women tend to write passively. I don't care how old you are. I work with kids who are recent college grads all the time. They write as passively as people my age. Why, I'll never know, but it is the case. Men do it too, but not as much. So what I say is that the business and professional world are all about accountability. Take ownership for your work. Use words like established rather than participated, or led rather than contributed to.
Part of a team.
Part of a team. You know, you can take ownership. It doesn't mean you had to do it all on your own. Nobody's saying you're saying that, but you want to be accountable for your work. And this is probably obvious, but I'll say it just in case. Make sure your resume is written in the third person. The only exception to that would be your objective statement. So what's this deal about algorithms? If you haven't looked for a new job in a few years, you're probably hearing about it and saying, I don't know what to do with this. What do I do? So an algorithm, for those of you who are not familiar with them, is basically a software program written by a human being to go through a resume and scan it for information, in this case, generally keywords. There are no artificially intelligent algorithms. There are knowledge-based systems that will build on the information they've already accumulated to get better at how they're scanning. Most are not like that. The trick is that you're never going to know what that human being was looking for. So you're never going to beat the algorithm. So don't worry about trying to do that, but do be mindful of the fact that they're out there. And what we recommend, how you can action on that, is read the position description carefully. If there's language in that that's relevant to you, make sure to include it in your resume so that when your resume gets scanned, that language is in there and it pops up. If you are sitting there saying, well, I'm just at the outset, I don't really know what I want to do yet, or I haven't looked at jobs, I'm just trying to get my resume in order for the first time in a long time, think about an ideal position for you and then use that language. And remember, I said earlier, you're probably going to have multiple positions or multiple resumes. You may need to do that for a couple of different types of positions. Jay likes to say that plagiarism is permitted. If you see someone's resume or a LinkedIn profile, or you come upon something that really describes what you've done well, by all means, use it.
Especially a job description. If you see a job description online and you go, this is the ideal job for me, and I have skills like that, grab the language, put it in your resume. I got through Brockport plagiarizing.
That's not true. Can we move to the next slide, Jay? I hope that's not true. I didn't know you then. Anatomy of a resume, back to professional. Okay, professional experience is our next big focus here. And Jay, you want to move us one forward? Great. Again, I'm going to take a broader lens, pull the lens back a little bit, and just talk about the nuts and bolts. There are basically three kinds of resumes in terms of experience. One is chronological. That's the most typically used. It probably is the format you've used. The next is a functional resume. We do use them. AVIS was actually a combination in the end, which is the third type, where it is not as commonly used because it focuses more on your skills and knowledge than on the chronology of your positions accounted for by time. I say that a combination is generally the best type of functional resume to do because as people and also the algorithms are more familiar with chronological resume, and they just are easier to read. People frequently ask questions. How far back should I go? Ageism is a real thing, but even more importantly, most times not more than 20 years. Probably what you did 20 years ago doesn't have a lot to do with specifically what you want to do next. It may be part of your narrative and your story, but it doesn't necessarily need to be on your resume. If there's experience you've had from a long time ago that is really meaningful, either it was a great company or great work, or I don't know, what something really important, of course, put it in there. But
you have some industry expertise from earlier on, and you're applying to within a similar industry. You want to
use that, but generally speaking, before 20 years, we recommend that you create a separate category called previous experience. List the company or organization, your title, and the location, and don't do any description. Which positions, a related question, are which positions to include, which are those that are relevant. Obviously, you want to account for time. So I'll show you how we do that with somebody in a career transition in just a moment when we take a closer look. Gaps, that's a whole page on its own because gaps are a big concern. And what I want to say generally about gaps is many people have a gap in their work experience now. More than ever, people have gaps for lots of reasons. Don't worry about them. We'll sort of try to give you some suggestions about how to deal with them. If you are a recent graduate, we do encourage you, if you've self-funded your education or done work study, to include that on your resume. Generally, it impacts your internship experience, and it's perfectly fine to say it. In fact, people respect that you have done that. And it does help to explain why you might not have had relevant internships. Back to the conversation about functional titles, which I said really warrants a whole conversation on its own. Many people have titles that actually don't describe what they really do. For example, we have a client they're a nonprofit, a global nonprofit. They have a position that's called Program Officer in Social Welfare. That role is really a grant manager role. In the nonprofit world, grant management is huge. It's a very common title. But in this organization, that's not what they call it. So people looking at a resume have no idea what this person has done. We would say, take that title off and just use grant manager. It's easier. Remember, this is a marketing document. Another good example is Jay's been working with someone who's a VP of IT in a really teeny shop. There's 3 people in his department. It's the CIO himself and a third person who's very junior. As he moves forward, he's really not looking for a VP level role. He's really looking for a senior systems engineer role. And why is that so important? Because if he put VP down there and his resume went through an algorithm, he would probably get scanned right out as being overqualified. Or alternatively, he's misleading people to think he's been managed a large team. You just don't want to do that. So that's what a functional title is. And now we're going to pull this lens a little closer again and talk about how to list your professional experience. How do you actually write it up in a way that is consistent with an authentic resume based on our model? So I'm going to use our candidate, Hannah, who I worked with over the spring and summer. Hannah's in a transition from being a clinical social worker to working as a program manager in either HR or academia. And she has about 10 years of experience. So we first worked to identify her personal formula. You know, it's a pretty straightforward process. Holistic thinker, communicator, collaborator, self-starter, and innovator. And then we actually went to sort of rework her experience. This is what it looked like when I saw it, her original resume. Again, similar to Ava's profile summary, nothing wrong with it. It looks perfectly fine. It's not like a terrible professional experience listing, but it's very focused on her work as a clinician, which she wants to get away from. Jay mentioned the 80-20 rule. Here, 80% of what she's saying has to do with very clinical social work specific work. She came to what she, I think, wants to do. You could move us forward, huh? Thanks. During COVID, she was actually, they had to transition, as many places did, as Brockport did, very quickly to a virtual model with no prior experience in how to do that. She was just, the innovator self-starter in her just took this on and she rocked it. And it included doing workflows and beta testing and finding, software, worrying about HIPAA compliance. Like there was a lot that went into this. And I think as she went through that experience, she was like, this I love, this is what I love. And that had her rethink what she really wanted to do. So we flipped the way that her professional experience looks to highlight all of that experience, minimizing the clinical piece of it. We don't ignore it. She had a routine case management, which we put up at the top there, but we flipped the 80-20 situation, that 80% was more about this. I did use key accomplishments here, which is a section I really like to use. That's where you can do metrics. You can highlight your accomplishment in a way that's pretty concrete. Here's an example of doing that in a way that's qualitative, not quantitative, but important.
And a clear example of professional narrative, her personal formula, and her career arc, her experiences that she gained, and then putting them together in the direction that she wants to go moving forward.
This is Hannah's previous experience, and I'm just showing it to show you how you can streamline experience. She worked for 4 years at one place in 3 jobs. She originally had those all listed separately. I grouped them, which shows her continuity, 4 years at one place, her career progression, and it also allowed us to consolidate her experience there so that we could highlight the stuff that's relevant to what she wants to do rather than what she has done. Similarly, I grouped her key accomplishments together.
Focusing on what you want to convey to whom. This is what she wants to convey, this more recent work rather than the social work that she did before.
Okay, finally, under professional experience, gaps. How do I account for gaps? It's not just okay, it's good. The first, these are 2 different examples. The top one is fairly common. This person relocated due to his partner's relocation. His partner got his dream job in New York City. They lived in LA, and he went along because he didn't want to cross-continent relationship. On a normal resume, I would not have this so large, but I wanted you to be able to see it. At the end, I would just say left position due to family relocation. You might say for personal development, which people are doing a lot this year, or
personal sabbatical to study.
For
some people will
self-development.
Talk about that. Yeah.
Some people leave because they are taking care of an elderly or ill parent, or in a state of a deceased parent, or to raise children. There are lots of reasons. You can keep it simple, but just put it in there. The second example is COVID relevant, which is why I'm using it. This happened to somebody I know who accepted a position as a recruiter with Google. It was a contract position with the promise to become full-time. The day before she was supposed to start, she had already resigned. Google rescinded all those contract offers. There was an article in the paper about it, in lots of papers. It hit the Times, even though it happened in California. And we wanted to make sure, she knew there was going to be a gap in her resume as a result, so we accounted for it right up front. She did get another position actually, but she did have a 7-month gap, and it's done forever. It's on her resume. She doesn't need to worry about it. Okay, we're in the home stretch and I want to leave time for questions. I'm going to breeze through the rest of this. So we're going to go quickly through contact information. Obviously, your name, email address, a link to your LinkedIn profile is a must. Make sure your LinkedIn profile syncs to your resume. Put a photograph up there. It doesn't have to be a professional headshot, but it should be, and it can be casual, but it shouldn't be like a Facebook picture. Like you don't want, pets and things like that in it. If you have licenses or degrees, put them on there. In the case of Hannah, I left it off. I took her LSW off because it was going to be a problem for people looking at her resume when she was applying in HR. Optional phone, you don't have to do. People are very concerned about their privacy. Physical addresses are no longer important. They're meaningful if you're looking in a different city from where you've worked, just to at least indicate the city so people know that you don't need to be relocated. If you have a certain type of profession, like if you're an academic or you're a graphic designer, you may have a website link to your work to highlight it, but other than that, you don't need to do that. In terms of education, your most recent degree always goes first. Feel free to drop dates anytime you like. Include your majors as long as you would like to do that and you want, it's fine. You don't have to, but it's fine. But you want to exclude anything else other than maybe honors because they're not relevant anymore. You just don't need any of that. They just take up space and it's just not necessary. Certifications and licenses, by all means, anything you've gotten on your own or done professionally, you worked hard, put them in there. The exception to that is if it doesn't support well what you want to do. And I have an example of somebody I know well who's in finance, and she learned to be a massage therapist when she came to this country to learn English. And literally she decided that's how she was going to do it, and she did. but she does not put that on her resume anymore. She did it for a few years. She loved it, learned way more than English, loved what she did. But skills, by all means, similarly, put all of your technical industry specific skills and technologies in a skills section. And foreign languages, which are pretty important because of the fact that we live in such a global and diverse community now. Sorry, Jay, that's all I got.
Nope, you got a little more.
Oh, I do. I have one more slide. I thought I was done. Personal. That's because I'm looking at the time and I want to be sensitive. Personal stuff is fine to include if you'd like. You don't have to. It's nice for relatability purposes if you have something good. If you run, you know, if you do Ironman stuff or run marathons, whatever, put that in there. If you run like I do, which is not much, don't. I served as a public school board member. I do put that on my resume because it's important to me. But you just kind of want to think about how relatable your actual experience is. I wouldn't even put yoga, even though I do it, because I'm not really very good at it. So now I'm done.
Now you're done. And
Thanks for your patience.
Let me see if I can bring it home. Our model and the takeaways today. Your resume is a living document. Barbara covered it earlier on. You want to be able to adapt it. You want to adapt it for different jobs. You want to adapt it for things that you want to highlight. I outlined in the beginning, it's what do you want to communicate to whom and what do you have to work with. Keep most of what's in your resume relevant. If it's going to put you, because we talked about marketing document, if you want it to be a positive profile of you and not distract, not too much noise, nothing there that's going to have somebody go off in the wrong direction. You want to keep them focused on who you are, what you're all about, and what you want to do. Have it be authentically you. Professional narrative, have it be your voice. We'll get to that a little bit at the end there as well. Create the idiot-proof profile summary. It's important on the top to establish your professional narrative, let's say, in that summary, basically saying, here's what you're about to, here's what you will see in what's about to unfold. What you're going to see in my experience and what you're going to see in my skills and my education is that. And so what you're doing is when they get to that point and start to get to the bottom, they say, oh, I see what that person said at the top. Oh, this is validating what they said at the top. But the most important thing I want everybody to take away today is to identify and embrace your personal formula and your story. There's no such thing as to me, a bad story or whatever. Some people don't like to talk about, well, gaps. Some people don't like to own their gaps. Own your gap. If you had, you want to be comfortable with who you are and pivot it to a positive outcome. When we talk about personal formula and knowing your strengths, it's great to know what your abilities and strengths are and have them align with where you want to go. Great coaches are known for knowing their players' strengths, knowing where they will succeed, situations where they will excel, situations where they won't. And what the great coach will do is put their players in a position where they will succeed. When we find a candidate and when if your personal formula meets the right opportunity, the job will be easier. You will be more successful. You will be happier. And so the key, Ava went and continued to look for where her personal formula and her experience met the job itself. And as a result of that, she is going to be far more successful and happy. There's nothing that pleases us more than when a candidate comes back to us and said, a month or two later, I can't believe this job is like a dream job. It fits me so well. So go for that. And now, let's see. Question, if you want to take down our contact information, Paradigm Partners, we do search, we do coaching, we do resume writing and what have you, but take down our email addresses if you have to go and have any other questions. And then we're going to jump and take questions now. And hopefully.
If you have questions, feel free to email us based on this this webinar, you know, this presentation today, and we'll answer questions about, obviously, you know, no chart, nothing, just as part of this presentation. So feel free to do that. Absolutely.
So Jay and Barbara, thank you very much. We can, okay, I was going to say open it up. People can turn their cameras on and turn their mics on. We just have a few folks here. So if you have any questions, feel free to throw it out there. Like I said, turn your microphone on, turn your camera on, and we have some minutes for some questions here. Are people able to unmute themselves? You should be able to. Let me.
If you have them all muted.
Were
they
there
may
any
not be.
questions in chat?
Yeah.
No questions, chat. I believe I just unmuted everyone. So if you want to, if you're having trouble, put it in chat here.
Should be able to hear me now.
Yep.
Yep.
All right. I had a question. Like, I'm a new grad, and I'm trying to figure out like what's best for me in my resume. So, what's the recommendation you have for a brand new graduate?
Can you give us a little more to go on? Because what will be important is actually the process is very similar to what we just outlined. And I don't know, can you tell us what you feel your personal formula is?
What do you mean by personal formula? Like, I graduated like computer science. I don't have a whole lot of like job experience. This is what I mean. Like, what do I need to put in my resume to kind of stand out without a lot of job experience, just education experience?
Not knowing your profile in detail?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, without us knowing your profile in detail, it'll be hard for us to highlight that. With regard to your personal formula, there are probably traits that you have that are probably different than maybe some of the other computer science guys and gals that you've been around. So you want to distinguish what makes you unique, what makes you Ryan. So you want Ryan to come out, and that's how you want to gear your objective. That's how you want to gear your profile, and then you can just highlight some of your courses. If there are jobs that you had, even summer jobs that you had, that
Projects
or projects
for school.
you know, you want to look for what it paints the Ryan picture.
Do you know what kind of work you want to do, Ryan?
Something like computer software. So like software engineering, Java development.
Is there an industry you're more interested in?
Web development. I was pretty into web development.
Do you post anything on GitHub?
No.
Have you thought about that? We're going to get very specific into technology here, so I want to be careful. Ryan, if you want to reach out to us, we'll be happy to talk to you in more detail without having more of an understanding of what happens for people like yourself, sir, is you don't realize that you have things in your background or things you have done that are relevant. So what happens with a lot of candidates is, and it's easy when you have years of experience because you can point to what you have done. Candidates, well, like Ava came to us and pointed to 80% of the stuff she did that wasn't relevant. We had to pull out what was more relevant. With regard to recent grads, there's things, I mean, I was talking to somebody not too long ago and I said, well, what are your interests in all that? I see you got Eagle Scout on the bottom here. And we pulled out Eagle Scout, we pulled out Dependable, we pulled out projects that he worked and pushed through, and we highlighted that type of thing. So there may be things in your background that you have not even thought about that are relevant to somebody sitting across the desk from you.
Yeah, that's what I think I'm kind of at the point with. I have a lot of things that aren't really relevant in my resume right now, like a cashier, you know, it's not really relevant to a web development position, but there's projects that I've probably done in the past that I don't even realize that would work in my resume.
Well, there you go, projects. And by the way, working as a cashier means that you were working.
You were reliable.
And you were fine. And I don't know if you financed any of your education. And so, I mean, it's nothing is irrelevant. Well, some things are irrelevant, pardon me. But that is something, you know, what you do is when I said, what do you want to convey? Who do you want to convey it to? Okay, so we know a little bit of that. We know who you want to convey it to, the hiring manager in whatever given company, probably a company looking for software people. What you want to convey is what we want to come up with, and what do you have to work with? And you probably have more raw materials than you realize. So it's a matter of pulling those raw materials out and highlighting them in a way that is a positive, constructive way to communicate.
If you would like, feel free to reach out and email your resume to us, along with a link to your, if it's not on there, to your LinkedIn profile. And
Okay.
we'll take a look and probably be able to make some better concrete suggestions based on that.
Okay. Yeah. Is there information went away for your email? I don't know.
We'll
I
get
didn't
it.
write
It is.
I'll put it in the chat.
We'll get it
Okay.
to you, Ryan, too. We can send it out.
Okay. Thank you.
Had a question from Desi. How would you list maternity period if you continued working part-time from home during that period?
It depends on dates. I mean, you can put maternity. You can just list the part-time job and not even say maternity. Just list it as a job, not necessarily full-time or part-time. Especially, and it depends if it's relevant or not. If it's, in other words, like if it was a career continuum, and it was doing, you know, if you're in HR and then you left HR to do something, but you're working part-time in HR and then came back into HR. You might not even have to refer to maternity, but if you started to do something different during that time, then you can refer to that job and said, held this, you know, needed, and you could list that you were on maternity, not maternity leave, but part-time, took a part-time position to care for my newborn child. And this is where you want to own what's going on in your life. People sitting across the desk from you at jobs are human beings. They've gone through, they've had successes, they've had failures, they've had kids, they've had wives take off time, or mothers take off time. I mean, you know, they've been unemployed for stretches. So there's something about being comfortable with whatever has transpired and then moving on with it.
I want to just one comment, because I think for women, especially, maternity leave is really, it feels very uncomfortable for us to admit that. I recently, about a year ago, did a program, and it was hosted by the CEO of a large financial company on Wall Street. And he had his top 4 women leaders in the firm talking with us about women in leadership. And it came out in the conversation he moderated, and it came out that one of these women had come into his office one day in tears, talking about having a baby and the timing, and she wanted to have a child, and she was worried about the timing of it. And he looked at her and he said, do you mean to tell me, I mean, it's a hugely successful woman on Wall Street, that you're thinking about the timing of your pregnancy because of work? And she said, well, yes. And he said it was like a watershed moment. The guy has 3 kids. He never once gave it a second's worth of thought. And things are changing. And I want to put that out there specifically regarding maternity leave, because that's a big issue. And I think I want to kind of put your mind at ease a little bit that it may not be quite any longer as big a negative as people thought it was even 5 or 10 years ago. It's changing quickly.
Yes, without a doubt.
Thank you for that question, Desi. Anyone else? Just unmute yourself or put it in the chat if anyone has any questions. Well, we have our 2 experts here.
Don't be shy. Come on.
Don't be shy.
Ask for somebody else.
You know what they say in school, like there are no bad questions. They're all good. Is there anything we didn't cover that anybody might be interested in or need some guidance on? Everyone have LinkedIn profiles? Raise your hand if you do. And they're all synced up with your resumes. They're, you know, they don't have to be identical, but make sure that the dates match up. And LinkedIn is a little bit rigid in how you can format things, but you want to make sure that the dates really match up and that your positions match up. And we aren't kidding. Put a photo on there. Jay just said people sitting on the other side of a desk are human beings. People love to see a face.
They want to connect.
They want that face. Like there's something to that. And it does really take, the best advice we got was to take pictures outdoors in natural light on a sort of overcast day. And then they don't have to be, you know, professionally done. You can dress casually now, but not, you know, not in a t-shirt, but you certainly don't need if you're, you know, a suit or a tie or a dress or anything like that.
Let me throw something else out that's important to remember. When you do interview, the person across the desk from you wants to hire you. When you walk in, they want to be done with interviewing. When you walk in, they want to love you. They don't want to interview another person and then another person and another person. Generally, most people outside of HR people, hiring managers, hate interviewing. So they're waiting for the man or woman of their dreams to come in. And so one of the things that's very important on interviewing is to come in and be positive. And what I say to people all the time, I say, don't worry about, you know, they get nervous on interviews. I say, listen, if they ask all the right questions, you'll be a genius. If they ask all the wrong questions, you'll be an idiot. It's like playing a trivia game. And you say to the person, you don't know that, you know, and then you get a question. They go, you don't know that? If they ask all the right questions, I have people come out from interviews and they go, that was not even like an interview. It was like a conversation. Yeah. So the key here, Barbara has an expression as a headhunter. She says, kissing frogs.
We gotta kiss a lot
to try to find a prince, right? So when you're interviewing people, you're looking, and all of a sudden, this person's great. It's not that the person's better or worse. And I'll stay away from the hammer screwdriver analogy, Carrie, don't worry. It's not that a person's better or worse. It's that you walk into a situation that's appropriate for you. So just put yourself out there in as many positions as possible. And then all of a sudden it's going to click.
That's a really important point. There is an element of job search that's a numbers game. And we tell people—
What happened recently?
Well, we tell people to apply to 50 jobs a week. I know you're all balking, like 50 a week. There probably aren't even 50 out there I want to apply to.
50, wow.
And that's a huge goal. It's between you, yourself, and you. Nobody else needs to know about it. If you only apply to 5, but they're really like, you've spent a lot of time and effort, and you know, looking for a job is like worse than having a job. And they turn out to be really 5 great applications. So you didn't get to 50, big deal. But if you set that bar really high, and trust me, we did this with our own kids, and it forced each of them at different times in their life to go way outside of their comfort zone in their applications. And they both got hired in jobs that they would have never applied to if we had not been their parents as recruiters saying, you're going to apply. How many did you, and you know, we held them accountable. Like, how many jobs did you apply to today? Not our son.
And they probably lied to us.
And I'm sure they did
50.
tell the truth, but it did push them out of their comfort zone. We tend as people to self-select our jobs ourselves out of things rather than in. So that is a really important point. That
I want to build two more things. We had somebody who applied for a job and didn't get it, and she was mortified. I applied for this job and I didn't hear back from them.
She's a chemical engineer,
one job. And we had to say, do you know that job may not have even existed? You're personalizing it. Sometimes people, their jobs posted.
She sent me the job description, and I read the job description. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
And she said, I looked at it and I said, hey, did anybody teach you how to read a job description? She's a pretty new graduate as a chemical engineer. She said, no. And I walked her through this job description. There was no way she was ever going to get hired. She was completely, the title was process engineer, which was her title, but they were so different that she wouldn't have even wanted the job.
The takeaway though was if she didn't apply, she wouldn't have had a shot at it. And if you don't get brought in on it, it means nothing. And then
Right.
you move on to the next one and the next one, because a lot of times you'll apply for a job and half of what's in the job description is not truly required.
Yeah.
They just flesh out that this would be nice to have, nice to have, nice to have. And you have the two key ingredients. So just be out there and talk to a lot of people and put yourself in a situation where somebody will find you, because they will find you. And then invariably they can, what happened? They say, where have you been all this time? And it's like, I've been out looking for jobs. Nobody's been hiring me, but So.
You got a nice comment from Beth Ann Kibbe. She said, thank you so much for this hour of great information. She truly appreciates the opportunity. So
Thank
Our
you.
pleasure. Thank you for listening.
Any last minute questions? Anybody interested in hearing about the art of interviewing? I mean, not right now. I can go on for another hour or two, but if anybody's interested in a follow-up about the art of interviewing, that is a rich topic. And most people are so, because my whole thing about interviewing is like dating. And I equate it to dating. And some people say I hate dating, but it really is a matter of there's a lot of synergy there about meeting with people, and really interviewing is nothing more than a conversation. But if anybody's interested in that, tell Kerry and we'll come back and do something.
I was going to say, we may bring you back on that one. You have to bring Barbara along too.
Yes. Even though she went to University
I
of
know,
Rochester.
even though I was down the street.
I hated people at U of R when I was at Brockport. I was like, oh, those snobby people, we're state university people. We're good. And I ended up marrying one. Huh?
We didn't know each other back then. That was a good thing. We decided it was better we didn't meet in college.
We should let these people go back and apply for jobs and get the jobs of their dreams. When you get your job of their dreams, please, I want to hear from
Yeah,
you.
let us know.
Just say, hey, listen, it worked. And if it doesn't work, you can feel free to email us and tell us we don't know what the hell we're talking about.
Bad information.
Well, it seems like you two have the job of your dreams, being able to work together. And again, we're so thankful to have you share with us here today. Folks, the emails were in the chat. We can send a follow-up to you as well if you want to reach out to Jay and Barbara. We really appreciate it. And thank you to all of you for joining us for the free food for the mind for the day. Check on the Brockport alumni website to see the other ones coming up in the next few weeks, and enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Kerry. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia.